What's going on, everybody? Today's video is going to be a little bit different today. Instead of me showing you guys how to build something or a recent project, we're going to talk about the recent project and we're going to talk about what to know before you try to go into a project like it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is having an idea. Me personally, I've had the idea for that bathroom for a long time, so I already had something in my head, but I drew a blueprint of where I wanted everything. Then I drew a blueprint specifically for the drainage. I drew a blueprint specifically for the water distribution. And I didn't have to draw any blueprints for like the electrical because it was just an outlet and a switch on the same wall. But I did have to figure out where I was going to get that wire from and where I was going to tap into. So that's the first thing. The second thing, well, I shouldn't even make a number because there's so many things. So I'm just going to say another thing that you should know is tying into things are not going to always work like you thought they would. There is a lot of unseen things that once you really get into the project, you'll start to notice that this is more work than I thought it would be. Whenever you're doing a remodeling project, it's always more work than you think it's going to be. So one thing that was an issue on this project was crooked walls. The original walls that were there were not like square in any adjacent way, and they were not level going vertically. So me figuring that out, the new walls that I built were straight, but when it came to tying it into the crooked wall, I had to make some adjustments because I can't have a perfectly straight new wall that I built and the original wall is crooked and I know I ain't gonna take it down. So you got to kind of play with the level and all of that to make sure when you put drywall on or tile or anything like that, that it's going to be smooth and that the wall isn't going to be twisted. Because if you have a straight going into a crooked, it's going to look twisted. So that's one thing. You really want to build straight, but when you're tying into something that's originally there, sometimes you got to just tie into what's there the way that it is and make sure it's as stable as it can be. When I demoed the exterior wall where the window is, when I took that original window out and I took down some of the like paneling, I found out there is no insulation behind it. So then you're faced with the decision, okay, do I just put insulation in these two columns of studs or do I take out all of this material? Because if those two don't have it, you know the rest of the wall doesn't have it. So I had to make a decision with who I was doing the project for to, hey, are we going to take all of this out? So that's something to think about. It's always more work than what you think it's going to be. Like I said, the plumbing, the PVC, the water distribution, the wires, knowing all where it's going to go. Like I said, I drew up a plan for all of that stuff before even touching anything. So I kind of had that idea in the back of my mind. Different materials is a big thing to think about on remodel projects because this house was built maybe, I want to say in the 40s that I was doing this project on. They didn't use drywall. They used something that was similar to like a concrete board. And it literally breaks like concrete. So me trying to add drywall next to a material that's concrete board, you know that when you try to put spackling on it, it's not going to look the same. When you paint it, one material is going to shine differently with the paint and all of that. And then I think that with the concrete board, there was drywall behind it. And then there was the concrete board. And I was trying to tie 1/2 inch drywall into it. So obviously those thicknesses don't add up. So I had to put not bracing, but I had to put wood behind it to kind of bump out the wall to make sure I at least get a smooth finish. But like I said, you're still tying two materials that are totally different together. Another thing is the unseen. When I took down the one wall that was on the closet side, I noticed, I guess this is just something that they did back in the day because I don't see this anymore. There was a metal like lip kind of, or it was a screen, and it was kind of like angle iron, but it was a metal mesh, and it basically connected the ceiling to the wall that was already there. Well, I obviously couldn't get that out because I never planned on tearing out the ceiling. So for part of it to be stuck behind the ceiling, tying the two walls together, I had to come up with a different idea. I couldn't just put spackling over it and try to smooth it out because I knew that wouldn't work. So I was stuck with take the drywall up even with it, and then when I get to the little mesh, put a trim piece over it, and that's the only way I was able to hide it. So I had to be able to think fast and figure out what I was going to do because I just knew I couldn't rip that out. Another thing is, like I said earlier, is painting on different surfaces. There was probably like 3 different materials in there. It was the concrete board it seemed like it was all the way around. It's like they didn't put concrete board just where the toilet and sink was. The whole old part of the bathroom was done in concrete board. And then where the closet part was, that was drywall, but obviously it was older drywall. And then I obviously put new drywall in where, you covering up the door, the old door and everything like that. So it was 3 different materials in a way. So that was one thing to think about. And then I used some reclaimed materials. Some of the pieces of wood, since nothing was really structural, some of the boards that I had taken out, they were good enough to where I could use them to frame the door, or I could use it to frame the window or something like that. The amount of work and estimating how much you can get done is a big factor to think about when you take on a project like this. Because like I said, I had a lot of difficulties with things that I just didn't think were going to happen in the project. I thought I was going to be able to tear out everything, frame everything, and everything was going to be fine. I never even thought about the walls are crooked, or there's different materials in here, or the floor is more rotted than what I thought it was. I didn't think about any of that. And then I started tearing stuff apart, and I was like, this is a lot more work than I thought it would be. So that's one thing. If you don't think that you're going to be able to do more work than what you have in your mind, then it's probably a great idea to put the project to the side until you have that extra time for when surprises like that happen, you're able to deal with it and move past them. What's something else that you should know before going into a remodel project? Crooked pipes. This is sort of the same thing as the crooked walls, but when I was tying in the water lines for the sink and the toilet and everything else, like I said, I was looking in the basement. You see which one is hot, you see which one is cold, but when it was time to cut them open, some of them had the original pipes that I was tying into had been bent. They weren't straight. So obviously if you're putting a T on a pipe, the pipe needs to be straight. And it just so happened that sometimes where my T needed to go, the original pipe was bent right there. So how do I put a T that's perfectly straight on a crooked pipe? So you need to think about stuff like that. Working with rules and regulations, you need to know that before you do a remodeling project. I knew that the wire that was in the bathroom, I was going to use it for an outlet and a switch. So I knew there couldn't be an exhaust fan. I could have left the original window in there, but the original window didn't open. And if you know codes for bathrooms, if you don't have an exhaust fan, then you need to have a window that is able to open to let out the extra water, like the moisture in the room. It needs some way to escape. That's basically what a exhaust fan is for, but you can mitigate that by using a window that opens. So I did that. Like I said, it was kind of hard putting tile on a crooked wall, but I was able to do it. What else should you know before you go into a project like this? I think that's about it. I think you should know what materials you can reuse, and if it's worth reusing or just buying something else. All of that needs to be like understood, because when you're doing it yourself and say you're on a budget, the way that you take out the sink determines if you'll be able to reuse it. Like, yes, there are some like vanities and stuff that are like, they can't be saved and they fall apart as soon as you unscrew them or try to move them. But a lot about how you tear something apart has something to do with what you can reuse and put back. And that was a big thing. I couldn't just go in there swinging hammers and busting stuff up, because I knew that most of the fixtures and everything were going to be reused. So if you're working for somebody, like say that you're doing this job for someone else, the unseen stuff like the insulation, you can always just charge more. And the owner has to understand, look, I tore the window out. There's no insulation in this wall whatsoever. I'm going to have to charge you more to put insulation in. Or your pipes downstairs are all corroded and there's no way I can tie into it. You can always charge extra when you're doing somebody else's stuff because you're doing more work. But when you're doing your own work and you know that you're on a budget and you're doing it yourself, those type of things start to matter. Those can make or break a project, because you could be like, I don't have money to redo all these corroded pipes, so this project is on hold. And so now you've taken out sinks and toilets and you've capped everything off, and now your project is on delay. So these are just some things to think about before you do a project, or remodeling project, or do it yourself, whatever it may be. It doesn't even have to be a bathroom. It can be adding on a room, like a 10 by 10 addition, something simple. You're making a bedroom or a dining room bigger. You don't want to be building it and then you realize that, I don't know, the foundation on the original part is crumbling, or it's not square, so you got to cut things differently. You just need to know all that. You need to have an understanding and visualize what you do before you do it, so everything can be smooth. So I basically think that's everything that you need to know before you get into a big project. And you learn from experience and you learn from messing up. So if you know that you measure something and cut it, that it fits a certain way when you do it like this, or you know that a trick to take out the toilet, or you know a trick to hold, if you're working by yourself and you got to hold something and screw it in or nail it in at the same time, you start learning those tricks. So my biggest advice to anybody who's seeing this video is, if you want to do a project, after you've done everything that I've explained previous to this point, just do it. Put your gloves on, put your glasses on, grab your hammer, and just get down and dirty and do it. And that's how you'll learn the most. You'll start taking things apart and be like, I shouldn't have hit that like that. I shouldn't have tore that apart like that. And then when you're building, you be like, it would have been easier if I would have painted all these things before I nailed them in, or if I would have did this versus this. You learn that, and it's a cool thing to realize, and it helps you as projects go on, and you'll feel like you're a pro once you've done 3 or 4 projects and you know you've learned the tricks and trades of the game. So with that, I'm going to close this video. If there's any questions, you can ask them in the comment section. You can leave a comment. Make sure you like this video, send it to somebody, and I hope everything that I said in it you can use for your good. Appreciate it.